as a steward, this is not yours. You are doing this in service, and this is in service to God. This is in service to those that you are responsible for feeding, for keeping secure, for being a model of what it means to be engaged in the sanctified life.
All right. Welcome to Season 2 of the Leadership 360 podcast. We're so glad that you joined us. Our goal is to elevate leadership and inspire transformation, not transportation. We're not in that business, but we're excited that you joined us for season number 2. We had a great time in 2024 with season 1, and we are kicking it off with a friend of mine who I've gotten a chance to know, and we're going to talk about leading in small to medium-sized churches. And so I have Steve Cavender, who's the head elder of the Grandview Church, which is just down I-35W from where we are at the Texas Conference office. And I've gotten to know Steve over the last couple of years. So Steve, thank you for joining the podcast and
good to be here,
being willing to have this conversation. So before we start, tell us a little bit about Steve Cavender. Who are you? How did you end up here? Why are you here? I mean, I guess that's the whole conversation.
Been a long and hard road. I'm a graduate of Southwestern Adventist College before it was a university, and as it turns out, I'm the one and only biophysics graduate that institution ever turned out. By the time I got through that program, computers, though, were beginning to attract my attention because they were becoming affordable.
Gotcha.
And accessible. And so my career has been in software development primarily. And in the last 2 decades has been more on the web side of development and a lot on network security.
Okay. So working for yourself, working for companies?
Both.
Okay.
Over that time, yeah. Currently self-employed.
Okay.
And
Gotcha.
Still doing network security, still getting the bad kind of adrenaline from having to deal with hackers on websites.
Oh, yes. Yes, that is always going to have job security. No matter,
Yeah, you could wish for better kinds of job security.
That is very true. So you have a beautiful wife. We were talking off camera. 50 years of marriage.
50 years of marriage this past June. So
and
Diana,
and then kids.
2 beautiful daughters, and they're both married. 1 grandson, and 2 sons-in-law that we really appreciate when we get to see them. One's out in Plainview, Texas, which is the high spot in the road that keeps the people in Lubbock from being able to see the people in Amarillo. and our older daughter and her husband are up in Fort Collins, Colorado.
Okay, wow,
beautiful places.
So absolutely, very different places, but very beautiful places. So I'm interested talking about, you being the head elder. How long have you served at the Grandview Church as the head elder?
Let's see. So it's been, just over 2 years now.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm assuming you were an elder before. Okay.
Yes. And I've been an elder at various churches since I was in my 30s.
Okay. So you've got a lot of experience being in a leadership role in a local church. We were also talking that you've had experience seeing leadership and being part of leadership in different sized churches.
Right. Yeah. Been a deacon in a medium-sized church and as well, and been not elected a deacon even in a very large church. I was at the Loma Linda University Church for a while, where I was not one of the deacons, but I often would help with deacon duties.
So you've seen leadership from very large churches, Loma Linda, to smaller churches. What took you to the Grandview Church? We have a lot of churches here in the DFW Metroplex.
We do.
What was it about Grandview that took you over there?
It was a series of news articles that were in the Record over the course of a number of months. We were members at Keene at the time, And in the record, we would see an article about what the Grandview Church was doing with its food pantry. And next month, there was another article about what was going on at the food pantry. And I've not seen any other church involved in ministry quite that way on an ongoing basis. And it was intriguing and attractive as we need to see what's going on down there.
Gotcha.
We got down there. We were very comfortable as we got involved there. And within the first few weeks that we had attended down there, they were just then making the transition from being a branch Sabbath school organized under the Keene Church to being their own congregation.
Okay.
And so we just showed up right in time to be charter members there.
Gotcha. So you got in at the ground level, so to speak. What
an opportunity.
Wow.
Yeah.
So give us a little bit of context before we talk about your roles as head elder at Grandview. How big of a church is it? How many members? How many people come on a Sabbath morning? You guys have a great, beautiful facility, by the way. But give us a little bit of context of what kind of size church we're talking about.
We are a very small church right now. I believe that we have something over 70 members on the rolls. Our attendance is usually somewhat under 50 members.
Okay.
Sometimes under 40 members. This is one of those things that changed markedly as a result of the invasion of COVID.
Gotcha. Okay.
Back a few years ago. We've not seen some of those numbers return. One of the reasons where I'm very glad that we do stream our services because we are reaching people who are members and who have not been coming. And we're dealing with an aging population.
Sure. So that was going to be my next question. In terms of demographics, what's kind of the age bracket of the attendees? Let's
it's a very high percentage of seniors down there. Our children's Sabbath school divisions are quite small.
Okay.
We have sometimes in primary we'll have one.
Okay.
Sometimes in beginners we'll have 1, 2, or 4, and then we'll have some visitors and we'll have 8.
Okay, sure. And you never know when the visitors are coming.
You don't know.
Yeah.
And that is a challenge for our children's Sabbath school teachers. That is a huge challenge.
So given the kind of the profile of Grandview, we have a lot of churches here in the Texas Conference that are very much like that. You're not unique in that sense in terms of profile, which I think is why this conversation is so important, because we do have so many churches out there that deal with that same issue, of how do we plan for our children's Sabbath school. One Sabbath it's nobody or one, and next Sabbath it's 8 or 9 because we have an influx of visitors. But I want to kind of transition to, what do you see your role as an elder, and then we can hone in on then how do you see your role as the head elder?
Well, of course, when you look at the role of the elder, it's always important to keep a copy of the church manual, right?
Okay.
I mean, there are important things in there, but they don't shape your life every day.
Right.
It really has to be, you start off at that point of what the church manual talks about, and it does talk about the responsibility of leadership, of being spiritual leaders, working closely with the pastor and those kinds of things, and being a model in the church. It's in that regard that that's where I see the major responsibilities. You could say this about every office in the church, that we're giving this to you. You must be a steward of it.
Okay, sure.
And when you look at what the Bible talks about in terms of this steward and that steward and another steward, whether in parables or in life, it's leadership has to be in service to something larger than you, the leader.
Sure.
You need to be leading. You're not a boss.
Right. Okay. And I think that's an important differentiation. Is
it's huge.
You're leading a group of volunteers,
right?
That literally can say, "I'm out. I'll see you. I'll see you later," and there's no recourse whatsoever.
Right.
But also trying to motivate.
Yes, and that's I personally feel that that's one of the things that often having been in a situation in business where I've been involved with multiple teams of contributors to a project, most of which had no reporting to me.
Right.
I was reporting along with them to somebody else, but I would be expected to provide some leadership in there. And how do you lead someone when you have no control over their career?
Right.
And you do have to, you have to be listening.
Okay.
You have to be engaged. Engagement is, lack of engagement is one of the health problems, the social problems of our age. It's so easy to be unengaged,
right?
To be a little atomic, isolated particle.
No, and that I think you would see has been exacerbated by we talk about COVID.
Yeah,
is
very much so.
Now I can step back. I can be even more of an observer or a consumer, and not have any
and
skin
have
in the
it on
game.
my terms.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, and it's one of those two-edged swords. With now we're going to do this on streaming. We're going to do it regularly, but please don't use this as an excuse not to come.
Right.
It's not just a good idea.
Yeah.
In the Bible about where two or three or more are gathered together. That gathering together is very important.
Right.
And it makes that body a body of Christ.
So you have obviously a district pastor assigned to Grandview, Pastor Danny Flower.
Danny Flower is our pastor. He's also pastor over at Granbury.
So
we're sharing him.
You're sharing a pastor. Right. So how does your relationship with the pastor, it could be Pastor Danny currently or past pastor or whatever, as the head elder, let's hone in on head elder for a second. What are some best practices of how a head elder can interact and succeed in doing ministry alongside of a local pastor, especially a pastor that you're not seeing every week, that has 2, 3, 4 churches?
Well, I believe that it's while you do have a part that it's just the mechanics of to start with the formality of the worship service, that the elders are in charge of the worship service, whether an elder is speaking or whether we have a guest speaker.
Right.
But it goes beyond that, just those mechanics, to being on the same page in terms of what is our mission.
Okay.
We have many missions, but we are on a mission in our community, which I'm very thankful
Sure.
in regard to our relationship with Danny, that he is very much on board and a part of our outreach in every way.
Right.
Whether we're reaching evangelistically or reaching just into the mundane things of getting food to people in the community, and that we do that consistently, and we're getting good support from all kinds of volunteers in that regard. That all of that is very important to Danny, made clear in a very compassionate way by him to the rest of us as elders, and being on board along with him, each one of us, and we all have different lives that we're leading, the several elders, and so we can take up shared responsibilities in different way, but that having all of us working toward that one goal is what makes for our success, I believe, and makes us a group that works well together.
So what I hear you saying is that collaboration is so important, communication, because again, he's not there, but I love that idea of shared mission. We are all on the same page. My role as a pastor is to work alongside my elders.
Right.
Your role as an elder is to come alongside with the pastor and work together and be on that same page for the common mission.
And we have that, and then we all have that come alongside with regards to all our members or all of those that we are serving in whatever context.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and then that makes a cohesiveness out of the Christ's example of the body has different parts.
Right.
That we are not all eye or mouth or hand or foot.
So, from a practical standpoint, how often do you preach?
Not in the last since COVID, not very much.
Okay.
Because I'm the main technical resource there, and I've been in charge of the streaming.
Gotcha.
And I'm usually doing that these days.
So but when Pastor Danny's not there, it's usually one of the elders that
he's in this last year, he has had a number of individuals who have elder status.
Okay.
Throughout the Texas Conference that have been regular contributors. So at the present time, when he's not there, we're getting someone else from from outside our local congregation.
Gotcha. Yeah. That's how I ended up there. I preached at Grandview twice.
Indeed.
And it's because Pastor Danny said, "Hey, I'd love to, to have you Grandview." But in many churches, preaching is one of the main roles for the elders, especially for the head elder, is that when the pastor's not there, it's either the head elder that gets the folk to preach, or in some cases, they're preaching.
And I've done that quite a lot in the past. Yeah.
So let's talk about working with, how many other elders do you guys have? Let me start with that.
Right now, there are 4 other elders.
Okay.
It's going to be a little bit more than that. In our new
your new term,
biennial term.
Gotcha. So as you kind of look now as having been head elder there for a couple of years, what are some best practices that you have lived out to work with the other elders?
We almost always will have an elders meeting before our board meeting starts.
Okay.
That's been one component, and get a chance just to talk together in that much more constrained context. And as it turns out, in the past couple of years, and this is something that's changing, coming up shortly here. All of our elders have been all of our adult Sabbath school teachers.
Oh.
And we have shared that and rotated through that.
Gotcha.
And that working together, each one of us has a bit of a different approach in how we teach the Sabbath school lesson. And almost always we're all there to be participants when we're not teaching. And I believe that creates a great deal of fellowship within that group.
Gotcha. You'd be surprised, maybe you wouldn't be surprised, how many pastors I talk to or elders I talk to that they don't have elders meeting.
Oh, no, I would not be surprised.
And, to my experience has been always have, elders meetings are important, especially in the smaller churches, because you really are kind of the heartbeat, the boots on the ground every Sabbath when the pastor's somewhere else. You find the time together not only with the elders meeting, but also, like you said, with Sabbath school. You find that valuable for cohesiveness?
I do, yeah.
Okay.
Very much so, yeah.
That this idea of fellowship and, hey, we're in this together. Let's,
Yeah.
How are you going to, so you said you have a couple more elders coming on. How are you going to kind of integrate them into the system or what you guys have already going on?
Ooh. Well, okay. Some of the ones that are coming on in this upcoming term have been elders in the past, but took a step away from it for a while. I'm particularly pleased that our one new elder that's not been an elder there before is a brand new member.
Oh,
wow! Who has been involved multiple times in church planting in the conference.
Oh, wow.
And he is there because he has a place where he can do another church plant.
Okay.
So we have started a branch Sabbath school that is a Hispanic congregation just right there in our church. And he's leading out in the Hispanic services there. He's also going to be our youth Sabbath school teacher.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm really pleased. They've been meeting several weeks now, a couple of months, and it's very nice to have this as a part of our congregation. Even we've got separate services, but it's just so good to have that, because he's particularly taken a look at how the population of Grandview itself is being or is not being served right now.
So what do you look for when you look at your congregation? And again, you said it's predominantly older, more mature. What do you look for in elders when you're like, when obviously nominating committee time comes, and I'm sure you and Pastor Danny have conversation. Hey, looking down the road, who are potential elders coming down the road? What are some of those characteristics that you look for in men and women to serve as elders?
Well, the thing that seems to speak to me about each one of those people is that, a word that I used earlier is that they really do engage with others around them, and in many different ways. But it's not none of them have that. Now I'm an elder. Now I've arrived.
Gotcha.
Kind of.
Oh, wow. So some humility.
Yes.
In the sense that I'm still on this journey.
Yeah. And to the point sometimes that it's hard to think of myself as a leader.
Gotcha.
Okay. But nevertheless, I mean, that thought, that self-critical kind of thought inside, they all lead in different ways.
Gotcha. So I want to talk a little bit about the challenges. We've talked about some of the good things, but what are some of the challenges of being an elder, being a leader in a small to medium-sized church?
The the biggest challenge that I see these days is still the social shift that we've seen in the wake of COVID.
Okay.
There's much more of an ongoing lack of continuing commitment.
Okay.
To being a part of the congregation, and we have people who are there every week. We have people who are there 2 times out of the month or once a month, and some occasionally far less than that, and some that are just watching on streaming. Mm-hmm. And that's a difficult way of being able to stay engaged yourself, and there seems to be a shift in that. Why are you talking to me about engagement?
Right.
Right. This is not something that that is really my thing right now.
Right.
It is that seems to be the biggest hurdle to me right now. Now, the secondary to that is that when, like for instance, in leading out in children's Sabbath schools, when you don't have a commitment on the parts of the families that are bringing kids to come every week, it's I can't do a whole quarter-long arc on something that tells a story in that through kind of way. I can't build a craft that ties all of this together. And burnout then starts to become a problem for the people that are in that internal kind of ministry within the church where we're ministering to the members.
You went exactly where I was hoping you would go in terms of the challenge of the lack of engagement leads to then with the volunteers and the leaders who are engaged and who have made a commitment, then all of a sudden it becomes on their shoulders to, I got to keep doing this.
Yeah. How am I doing God's work if nobody shows up today? Yeah.
Or I've got no other help. I'm here. I can't take vacation, or I can't, I can't, peel off for, a couple of weeks to go see grandkids or whatever. Because if I'm not there, there's nobody there. And, is often the case, it's, when nobody's manning the Sabbath school, the children's Sabbath school, that's when you have, the visitors, and then you have other people having to, step in last minute. So it's almost a double-edged, as the lack of engagement, you don't have as many people engaged, which then leads to burnout with the leaders that are engaged.
And 30 years ago, when I was in a small church and I was first thinking about the downsides of being in a small church, it was all in terms of, everybody's wearing multiple hats, and it's a hard thing to get anything large enough to really be a group activity. But that problem has just been severely compounded for small church, and I'm sure for medium-sized churches too. And it takes a toll on people who do not feel fulfilled unless they are engaged again in that very activity. That to the point sometimes of am I not doing God's will?
Right.
That takes an awful toll.
But how do you see us? Because again, that dynamic's not going to change. How do we deal with that in small churches where you have people that feel and feel valued because they're volunteering? Partly, some of it may be, man, I've always done this. I don't know anything else. And so I got to do this because this is my thing for the last 30, 40. But you recognize that it's taking a toll on physical health, spiritual, whatever part of their life. It's taking a toll.
It does take a toll. I don't have a good answer there right now. I don't, because that's one of the struggles that we are in the midst of dealing with.
Right.
We encouragement is sometimes helpful, but not always.
Right.
It's I can only to a certain extent walk in the shoes of that other person.
Right.
And but keep on loving.
Yeah.
Keep on loving.
So as you look at your experience, let's for a moment say that there's a new leader listening to this podcast. They maybe just have gotten elected as an elder or even a leader, a department leader. What piece of advice would you give them as they begin this leadership journey?
You are a steward. And a steward is carrying around a big ring of keys sometimes, and responsible for feeding a lot of people. And there's a promise of great reward for someone who's doing that proper feeding at the time they need to be doing that feeding.
Right.
But as a steward, this is not yours. You are doing this in service, and this is in service to God. This is in service to those that you are responsible for feeding, for keeping secure, for being a model of what it means to be engaged in the sanctified life. And it's a lot of people can mishear what it means to have a sanctified life. Like, that's one of those, you think you're all that.
Right.
But the sanctified life is as much a gift that's solely due to God,
right,
than any other gift that we have. And it is one that we cannot be Christians if we are not on that path, right, of the sanctified life.
So to boil it down, is what I hear you saying is that it's not, always remember, let's put it that, always remember it's not about me, it's about God and what God has given me to steward in this local context in his time for as long as he wants me to do it. Because I think part of the challenge is that some leaders hold on to that office or that role because that's all they have, because that's in their mind the only thing they have.
Yeah. I'm sure that happens. I'm very thankful that I'm not dealing with that in anyone. That in our local congregation. But
so it's not just, so the advice is, remember, it's not about me as the leader. It's being a steward of what God has given me.
Yes, and life wouldn't be called a crucible at times if it weren't more hot than you can handle, and but that's life.
Yeah. So as we kind of wrap things up, I want to give you an opportunity, as we've kind of covered a lot of territory. What is one takeaway, the takeaway, that if everybody forgets what we've talked about, what is one takeaway that you would kind of sum up what it means to be a leader in a small to medium church?
Have your eyes open,
Okay.
and your ears open, and your heart open, because this message that you may be very passionate about is not just a message from you. You always want it to be a message from God. And this process of communication is one in which the one opening their mouth and speaking, or standing up in front of people and how they comport themselves, it doesn't necessarily come across the same way to everyone in your congregation. And so you need to know your congregation, and need to have as much sensitivity as you can, and not everybody has the same sensitivity, of how your message comes through. It's not easy to get that feedback.
I love that.
But you really have to be engaged one-on-one to some extent. You may not be able to sit next to every single person in that small church and get immediate feedback from them, but you have to accumulate that feedback.
Yeah.
And so it's stay sensitive,
Okay.
because again, this is not, as you well pointed out, this is not about me.
Right.
And so if I'm sensitive for how God is being received, it's a whole lot safer than me being ultra sensitive about my feelings today. And
I love that. I love that. I want to spend a couple of minutes. We always do a lightning round at the end.
Okay.
You don't know what's coming.
No.
It's going to be, there's no right or wrong answers. So it's either going to be a statement or a question. But it does tell us a lot about it. Like I said, it's a lot of fun. All right. First one, really easy. Morning person or night owl?
Morning person.
How early do you get up in the morning?
Oh, I am thankful when I'm not up before 5.
Oh, okay.
I usually up between 4:30 and 5:30.
Wow. So you definitely are a morning person.
Yeah.
All right. What is your favorite time of the year? It can be season, could be month, could be hot. What is your favorite time of the year?
I have lived in enough places with nice fall colors that fall is really, and it's tough in Texas because sometimes you don't have a fall in Texas.
It's true. That is very true. That is very true. Number 3, what is the most memorable trip you have ever taken?
Well, summer of 1969 to the World Youth Congress in Zurich, because as that trip was getting started, that was where I met the girl who would become my wife. And so that almost a month was a very memorable trip in a lot of ways, more than we have time to recount at this point.
It's funny when I came up with that, and then as we were talking off camera, I'm like, I have a feeling that's going to be answered at number 3. What is one thing on your bucket list?
I would like to get my wife along with me on some trips to some of the national parks that I've seen that she's not yet seen.
Okay.
And we've been working our way through some of those. About a year ago, we went to several of the parks in Utah.
Okay.
And I've not been able to get her to Yellowstone yet.
Oh,
Looking
wow.
forward to that.
I hear it is life-changing. I've never been to Yellowstone,
Yeah.
so.
It's an overpowering experience.
Number 5, if you could have any animal as a pet, any animal, what would it be?
Well, that's a little bit awkward because I found when a few years ago it came along that we had chickens and we had horses on our property at the time, I found that I liked non-pet animals better than I liked pet animals, either cats or dogs.
Sure.
And so it doesn't strictly fit with the notion of a pet, but I do like having a small amount of livestock around that takes some care. And,
Sure.
and they have different kind of lives that you get to watch.
Right. No, that's great. That's great. I love that. All right. This is the holdover question from last year.
Uh-oh.
Best piece of advice you ever received?
Oh. Can I give it in terms of the relationship that it created rather than the specific piece of advice? I was a young engineer at the time, and I was just having to make the transition from not being a manager to having to manage other engineers, and this was not an easy transition. My dad had an MBA and was very good in business, had been a manager in a number of technology companies over the years. And our relationship changed at that point. I was already to the point where I knew my dad was smart and knew a lot of things, but I'd gotten past that you don't know anything kind of stage. But he and I started having long mentor and mentored conversations about management of people. And that whole experience was the best for me, developing a relationship with my father that I'd not had before, and learning the selflessness of being a good manager.
Wow. So it wasn't just one piece, it was this relationship, this transition of relationship that you have with your dad.
Yeah.
Because you realize that he had a lot of knowledge and a lot of wisdom that, I pray that day comes soon for my, two teenagers. Like, okay, one day they're going to say, Dad. But I love that it was not just one nugget of advice, that it was a relationship over the course of years that you were able to glean from his experience. Steve, this has been great. This has been more fun than I even anticipated. You've set us up for a great season 2. I appreciate you coming in, and I appreciate getting to know you a little bit more, and look forward to seeing what God's going to continue to do through your life and through your ministry. So, and thank you for joining us for Leadership 360. Again, subscribe where you get your podcast. If you're on YouTube, go to the Texas Adventist channel. If you're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere you receive your podcast, get your podcasts every month. We drop the third Thursday of the month. And so you want to make sure that you subscribe, because we want you to be the leader that God has meant you to be. So we'll see you next month with another episode of Leadership 360.